It was meant to be just another relaxing weekend getaway with a few close friends. We'd rented a cabin up in the mountains, a place far away from the noise of the city where we could just unwind and have a good time. But that all changed the moment I found myself alone in the hot tub with Galvin and his best friend, Daryl. Galvin and I had known each other for a while. We met in college and quickly became good friends. He was always the life of the party, full of energy and always up for anything. I, on the other hand, was a bit more reserved. I liked to keep to myself. But when Galvin invited me to this weekend trip, I figured it'd be a good opportunity to loosen up, get out of my comfort zone, and spend some time away from the daily grind. The first night was pretty chill. We had a few drinks, played some games, and spent hours laughing around the fire pit. Daryl, Galvin's best friend, had joined us too. I hadn't really talked to him much before, but he was a cool guy, tall, with dark hair and an easygoing personality. There was something about him that made him approachable, and over the course of the evening, I found myself getting along with him more than I had expected. After a while, we all decided to hit the hot tub. The night air was crisp, and the steam rising from the tub seemed like the perfect way to wind down. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, I should have known that something was about to change, something I wasn't prepared for. Galvin and Daryl were the first to hop in. I followed shortly after, the warmth of the water instantly relaxing my muscles. I leaned back against the edge of the tub, letting the jets massage my back as I took in the view of the mountains. It was peaceful, and I felt my worries melt away with every minute that passed. For a while, it was just us talking and laughing, enjoying the night, but then something shifted. I'm not sure when it happened, but it was as though the dynamic between us had changed. Galvin and Daryl were now sitting closer to each other, their conversation quieter, more intense. Every so often, I'd catch them exchanging glances, almost like they were sharing some secret. I couldn't help but, 226, wonder what was going on. It wasn't like them to be so, secretive. "Hey man, you okay?" Galvin asked, noticing that I was staring off into the distance. I snapped out of my thoughts and turned to look at him. "Yeah, just thinking," I said, giving him a small smile. Daryl, who had been quietly observing us, suddenly spoke up. "You seem a little distracted. Man, everything good?" I nodded. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." The two of them exchanged another glance, this time more deliberate. It made me feel uneasy, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I didn't know what, but I could sense it in the air, the tension, the unspoken connection between the three of us. Daryl shifted slightly, now facing me with a more serious expression. "You know, you don't have to hide it," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "We've all been friends for a while, right? If there's something you need to talk about, you can." I was taken aback by his words. What did he mean by that? I hadn't said anything to suggest I was hiding anything, but as I looked at him, I couldn't help but notice the way his gaze lingered on me. A hint of something more in his eyes. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just stayed quiet, trying to ignore the growing sense of discomfort. Galvin, sensing the shift in energy, leaned forward. "Hey, we're just messing with you. Relax," he said, his voice light and teasing. But there was something different in the way he said it, like he was trying to break the tension. Or maybe he was making it worse. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening beneath the surface. There was a quiet energy between the three of us that was hard to ignore. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what was going on. Was it just my imagination? Or was there something more going on between Galvin and Daryl than they were letting on? The hot tub felt suddenly too small, too confining. The water seemed warmer now, the steam rising thicker, wrapping around us in a way that felt almost suffocating. I looked at Galvin and Daryl again, but this time I noticed how close they were sitting. Their legs brushed together every so often, their voices growing quieter as they spoke in hushed tones. I felt a nervous tension building in my chest, but at the same time there was something thrilling about it. There was an electricity in the air, a charged feeling that I couldn't deny. I couldn't figure out what was happening, but I knew that I was on the edge of something big. Something that could change everything. Daryl shifted again, this time even closer to me. I couldn't help but notice the way his body moved, the way his thigh brushed against mine. I froze for a second, unsure of what to do. My heart started to race, and I felt a lump form in my throat. Was he doing this on purpose? Was Galvin aware of it? Was I imagining it? Galvin, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up again. "You know, it's okay," he said, his voice a little lower now. "You don't have to be so tense. We're all friends here." There was something about his tone, something in the way he said it, that made my stomach tighten. Was he trying to tell me something? I looked at him, trying to read his expression, but it was hard to make sense of it. His face was relaxed, but his eyes were full of something I couldn't place. Before I could process what was going on, Daryl leaned in, his lips brushing my ear as he whispered, "We're not judging you. You know, if you want to let go, we're here for you." I shivered, not sure how to respond. The way he said it, the way his breath tickled my ear, made my pulse race. I tried to pull away, but my body didn't listen. Instead, I found myself leaning into him, my heart pounding in my chest. The atmosphere around us was thick with tension, and I could no longer tell if I was imagining things or if something was really happening. The lines between friendship and something else were blurring, and I didn't know what to do about it. I had never been in a situation like this before, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever was about to unfold. I looked at Galvin, who had been silent throughout the whole exchange. He just stared at me, his eyes locked on mine, waiting. The moment stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. The only sound I could hear was the soft bubbling of the hot tub and the distant hum of the night. And then, just as I was about to speak, Galvin leaned in closer, his body just a few inches away from mine. I could feel the heat radiating off of him, but it wasn't just the warmth of the water that made my heart race. There was something in the air, something I couldn't quite place. Daryl's presence next to me made the tension even thicker, like everything was building to a moment I didn't know how to handle. "You're really tense, man," Galvin said quietly, his voice low and soothing. His words felt almost like a command, urging me to let go. But I couldn't bring myself to relax, not with the way Daryl was sitting so close. And not with the way Galvin's eyes were now focused entirely on me. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. "I'm fine," I muttered, trying to sound nonchalant, though I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks. The last thing I wanted was to appear nervous, especially not when the two of them were so close. But I couldn't help it. Something was happening here, something that was far beyond what I had ever expected. Daryl, sensing the growing tension, reached out and lightly touched my shoulder. The contact was soft, but it sent a jolt through me. "Relax," he said, his voice so smooth that it almost made my mind go blank. "We're not going to bite." I didn't know what to say. His words were meant to be comforting, but they only made my heart race faster. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, excitement, and a strange sense of anticipation that I couldn't shake. My mind kept screaming at me to back off, to escape the situation before it went too far. But at the same time, something inside me wanted to stay, wanted to see where this could go. Galvin was still staring at me, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity I couldn't ignore. His gaze seemed to pierce through me, making me feel exposed, vulnerable, in a way I had never experienced before. He didn't say anything for a long moment, and the silence between us was deafening. It was like he was waiting for me to make the first move, waiting to see if I would take the leap. "Do you trust us?" Daryl asked suddenly, his voice calm but serious. His question caught me off guard, and I found myself hesitating before answering. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure why. I did trust them. I had known Galvin for a long time, and Daryl had always seemed like a good guy. But that didn't mean I was prepared for whatever was about to happen next. I wasn't sure I was ready for this, for what was building between us. Galvin smiled at my answer, a small, knowing smile that made me feel even more nervous. He leaned in a little closer, so close now that I could feel his breath on my skin. "Good," he whispered, and then without warning, his hand gently brushed against mine. The contact was electric, and I froze. His fingers barely grazed mine, but it felt like a spark had ignited between us. For a moment, I couldn't think, couldn't move. It was as though the whole world had paused, and all that mattered was the sensation of his skin against mine. Daryl watched us with a knowing smile, clearly aware of what was happening. He didn't say anything, but I could feel his eyes on me, waiting to see how I would react. The heat in the hot tub felt almost unbearable now, and it wasn't just the temperature of the water. It was the heat between us, the way the tension was building with every passing second. Galvin's hand didn't move away. Instead, it lingered, and I could feel his fingers gently brushing against mine again, this time more intentionally. He wasn't teasing, he was making a move, and I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to pull away, to break the contact, but another part of me, Something deeper inside wanted to stay, wanted to see where this could lead. Daryl leaned in slightly, his voice low and almost conspiratorial. "It's okay, man," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "You don't have to be afraid of what's happening here. We're not going to judge you." His words were like a permission slip, giving me the green light to let go of my hesitation. But it only made me more confused. Was I really ready for this? Was I really prepared to cross that line? To explore this side of myself with Galvin and Daryl? I had always thought of myself as straight, or at least that's what I'd always told myself. But now, in this moment, sitting in the hot tub with them so close, I wasn't so sure anymore. Galvin's hand moved again, this time brushing against the back of my fingers. His touch deliberate but gentle. My breath hitched as I felt his skin against mine, and I couldn't stop myself from responding. My hand, without thinking, moved closer to his until our fingers were almost touching, just a hair's breadth apart. Galvin's gaze never left mine, his eyes full of something, desire. I wasn't sure, but whatever it was enough to make my heart race even faster. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something huge, something I couldn't take back. Daryl shifted beside me, his knee now brushing against mine, and I couldn't help but notice how close he was. He wasn't just sitting near me anymore, he was touching me in small, subtle ways that made my skin burn. I was trapped between the two of them now, and I didn't know what to do. The world seemed to be spinning around me, and I could only focus on their presence, on the way they were both so close to me, so intimate. Galvin's voice broke through my thoughts. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said softly, "but if you want this, if you want us, we're here." I didn't know how to respond. All I could do was stare at him, my mind racing, my body frozen. But then, slowly, I nodded. I didn't know what I was agreeing to, but in that moment, I realized I didn't care. I didn't care about the consequences, about the labels, about anything. All I cared about was what was happening right here, right now. Daryl's hand brushed against my leg, his touch light but unmistakable. He wasn't being subtle anymore. He was showing me exactly what he wanted, exactly what he was ready for, and somehow that made me feel both terrified and exhilarated. The tension between us was unbearable now, and I knew that there was no turning back. The air around us was thick with anticipation, and I was caught in the middle of it, unsure of where to go but unable to resist. Galvin's voice, calm and confident, finally broke through the side. "We can take it slow," he said, "but just know this. If you want to do this, if you want us, we'll be here." And with that, the moment stretched out, the weight of his words sinking in, and I knew that this weekend would be something I would never forget. The air was thick with tension as I sat there between Galvin and Daryl, my heart racing with anticipation. I wasn't sure what to do next, what was expected of me, or even what I truly wanted. Everything felt like it was happening so fast, yet I couldn't bring myself to stop it. In the hot tub, the warm water bubbled around us, but it did nothing to ease the fire that had ignited inside me. Galvin's hand was still so close to mine, his fingers now lightly brushing against my skin as if testing the waters. Seeing how far I was willing to go, Daryl was next to me, and his knee was still touching mine. The closeness between us undeniable. I could feel their presence like an electric current, sending waves of excitement through my body. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," I said quietly, my voice barely audible, but Galvin heard it. He didn't pull away, didn't look away. His eyes remained fixed on mine, filled with something I couldn't quite name. But it wasn't just desire. There was something deeper there, something that made me feel safe, even as everything felt so new and uncertain. "You don't have to be," Galvin replied softly, his voice reassuring but filled with a quiet confidence that only made me more nervous. "We're not going to push you. But if you want this, we're here for you." Daryl nodded beside me, his gaze shifting from Galvin to me. His hand moved ever so subtly to rest on my thigh, just above the waterline. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't a slip of the hand. It was deliberate. He was making a statement, showing me what he wanted, what we all wanted, and my body responded before my mind could process it. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks again, my pulse quickening as I glanced down at Daryl's hand still resting on my thigh. His touch was light, but the sensation sent a shiver down my spine. It was both comforting and thrilling. In that moment, I realized something that I hadn't fully understood before. I wasn't just curious, I was craving this. Craving them, the way they were touching me, the way they were looking at me. It felt like something I'd been wanting without even knowing it. Galvin's voice broke through my thoughts once more. "You're not alone in this," he said gently, his tone soft but serious. "We'll go at your pace. Just tell us what you need." I swallowed hard, trying to gather my thoughts, to find the words to explain how conflicted I felt. But in reality, I didn't need to say anything. I didn't have to explain myself to them. They already knew, and in a strange way that made everything feel easier. The pressure lifted just a little, as if I no longer had to carry the weight of confusion or guilt. Galvin and Daryl weren't just offering me something physical, they were offering me understanding. A space where I didn't have to hide who I was. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for Galvin's. The moment my fingers brushed his, he didn't hesitate. He intertwined our hands, pulling me closer. It was a simple gesture, but it made my heart race in a way that nothing else had before. I looked into his eyes, searching for something, reassurance, maybe, or maybe just the courage to continue. "You're sure?" I asked, my voice shaking just a little. Galvin smiled, a soft, understanding smile that made my chest tighten. "Yeah, I'm sure. We're both sure." Daryl, still sitting next to me, leaned in and whispered in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "You don't have to be afraid. Man, we're not going to judge you. Just let go." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. I felt the last of my hesitation slip away, replaced by something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time: desire. I wanted this. I wanted them. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but in that moment, it didn't matter. I was done fighting it, done second-guessing myself. I was ready. Slowly, cautiously, I leaned in toward Galvin, my lips meeting his in a tentative kiss. It was soft at first, hesitant even, as if we were both testing the waters. But the moment our lips touched, something changed. The tension that had been building between us for what felt like hours exploded. And the kiss deepened. Galvin's hand moved to my neck, pulling me closer as his lips parted against mine. I responded, my own hands reaching for him, unsure of what to do but not caring. Daryl's presence was still there, just beside us, but I couldn't focus on anything other than Galvin. His kiss was electric, his body pressing against mine in a way that sent shivers down my spine. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The hot tub, the three of us, the way we fit together, it felt right, even if it was new, even if it was terrifying. Galvin pulled away for a moment, his forehead resting against mine as we both caught our breath. His eyes searched mine, as if asking for permission, as if waiting for me to decide how far I wanted to go. "Are you sure?" he asked again, his voice thick with desire but still so gentle. "We can stop anytime." I nodded, my voice barely a whisper as I spoke the words that had been swirling in my mind for so long. "I want this. I want you both." Without another word, Galvin kissed me again, and this time there was no hesitation. His hands moved to my chest, his fingers tracing the outline of my body beneath the water. I felt his touch everywhere, on my skin, my chest, my legs, and each touch sent waves of heat through me. Daryl, not wanting to be left out, moved closer as well. He leaned in, pressing his lips against my neck, his hands finding their way to my back. I moaned softly at the feeling of both of them so close, so eager. It was overwhelming, but it was exactly what I had been craving. The rest of the world faded away, leaving only the three of us in the hot tub, tangled in a moment that neither of us would ever forget. It didn't matter what had brought us here or what came next. All that mattered was that I had finally let go, finally embraced what was happening, and in doing so, I had found something I hadn't even known I was looking for. As the night wore on and we explored each other's bodies in ways I had never imagined, I realized that this moment, this experience, had changed everything. The boundaries between us, between what I thought I knew and what I was learning, were completely blurred, and somehow that was okay. I had no idea where this would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt alive.